Hello, everyone, everywhere. Pastor Robert Thibodeau here. Welcome to the Kingdom Crossroads podcast today. We're so blessed that you're joining us. We've seen news reports about how the COVID lockdowns has detrimentally affected the aptitude scores of school-age children. We've seen reports of how many students are still struggling in school. Those 2 years of the shutdown has set many students back years in their ability to use applied knowledge to their studies. But there's also another group of students that suffered greatly. Their stories are not being promoted or discussed very much in the public sector, but that's nothing new. For many special needs students, their stories have not been that front and center that often. The teachers tasked with helping these special needs children also struggle in trying to help them achieve success. The COVID lockdowns affected them too. There's just something missing with virtual learning that has cost our children dearly during COVID, especially in the special needs community. My guest today has been working with special needs children for over 25 years. Shelley Kenow is a certified special education teacher and the author of a captivating book, Those Who Can't Teach: True Stories of Special Needs Families to Promote Acceptance, Inclusion, and Empathy. Now get ready to be inspired and gain new perspectives as we dive into Shelley's incredible journey and the transformative power of her work. Amen. Help me welcome to the program, Shelley Kenow. Shelley, it is such a blessing to have you on the program today. Thank you for coming.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for having me. I'm looking very forward to this.
Amen. Now, the first question I always start with is this. Other than that brief information I just shared, can you tell us in your own words, who is Shelley Kenow?
Well, I am a wife, a mother. Well, let me back up. I am a Christian, a wife, a mother. My Christianity is first and foremost in my life. I am, as you said, an author. I've been in special education now for over 30 years. I've been a
Wow.
paraprofessional, a teacher, a sub. I have now become a IEP coach. I help families and school districts navigate through that special education world. And I have my own podcast. I think
Amen.
I've covered it all.
Amen. Well, let's back up way back to the beginning. What first motivated you to become a special needs educator?
Well, that's a wonderful and beautiful story of God. When I was 9 years old, I knew I wanted to be a teacher. I had a fantastic third grade teacher, which was the grade I was in at the time, and I wanted to be like her. I never wavered from wanting to be a teacher. As I was going through elementary school and middle school, I had this little voice in my head telling me, you should teach kids in special education.
Hmm.
And I would just push that little voice aside and say, oh no, I don't know enough about those kids. I don't know enough about their abilities. I'm going to feel sorry for them. I'm not going to have high enough expectations for them. Continue on through high school. I'm still having this, I still want to be a teacher of elementary students, gen ed elementary students. As a sophomore in high school, I was able to participate in the Special Olympics program in our area. And I thought, wow, this is really great that they have a program for those kids. And I found myself always referring to the kids who learn differently as those kids. And that still small voice popped back into my head. You should go into teaching special education. No, I'm not going to have the ability. I'm not going to have the expectation. I'm not going to have anything in common. I'll feel sorry for them. All these negative approaches, all these wrong thoughts. I get into to high school after high school, and I thought, I know I've wanted to be a teacher since I was 9 years now. I'm 18, but I want to be a paraprofessional, make sure that I do really want to be in this classroom setting all the time. So I get hired at my own school that I grew up in as a paraprofessional, and I start working with kids who are having some reading struggles, who are having some math struggles, who are having some behavior struggles. And I absolutely loved it. I met and married my husband during that time that I was a paraprofessional. He was in the military, and we were stationed overseas. I started working in the Department of Defense dependent schools as a sub, as a paraprofessional. The first long-term sub position that I had was in a preschool room, and I had this little guy the very first day, and he had the worst behaviors I had ever seen with a student. He kicked, punched, scratched, screamed, ran, spit, just cursed, anything you could think of. He did it. And that was all in my first morning that I
Wow.
experienced those behaviors with this little guy. So at lunchtime, this was an all day preschool. At lunchtime, I was talking to the teacher and I said, you know what? Give me some more background about this little guy. And so she did. And he'd had zero consistency up to this point in his life. His parents dropped him off the second they could at the daycare, and they didn't pick him up until the second they had to from the
Mm.
daycare. It turns out that his mom really didn't want him. And so he was having a lot of hurtful feelings inside, and he didn't know how to express that. And so the kids went down for a nap. I gave him a big hug after the nap was over, and I talked with them, and I said, we're going to make this better. I was in that classroom for 3 weeks, and from the beginning until the end of that, the transformation in this little guy was incredible.
Mm.
With the consistency, with holding to high expectations, which went explaining why he was expected to behave a certain way, why it was important, with giving him consequences, both positive and negative, when he had wanted and unwanted behaviors. And then the next year, I was hired in a kindergarten classroom full time as a paraprofessional for 5 students, all of whom were in special education. And then it hit me. Shelley, you have been working with kids in special education. The Lord has brought you into each of these situations, and you didn't even realize that
Yeah.
these were the kids that you had labeled those kids all of those other years.
Hmm.
And in that year of being in that kindergarten classroom, I had another little guy who had extreme behaviors. I thought the first one had big ones. This second one had them more frequently, more intense, and for longer periods of time.
Mm.
But we were able to transform him as well and help him understand why he was having the behaviors that he was having. And so come back to the United States, and I said, okay, Lord, I got it. I get why you've told me to go into special education, because I absolutely fell in love with all of the kids that I had helped in all those years when I didn't realize I was working with quote unquote those kids.
Hmm. Amen. Amen. When you first started teaching special needs children, what were some of the major obstacles you faced and how have they improved over the years?
A lot of the obstacles had to do with a very similar perspective that I had, that children who learn differently, as I like to refer to them, are are somehow less, and they're not as capable, and they're not going to be successful, and they're not going to achieve great things in life. And honestly, that's very far from the truth. Um, I often found that people, especially educators that I worked with, and hopefully it's just in my area, but I really don't think it is, because I'm a pretty busy IEP consultant and I work a lot with families and a lot with school districts who face the same challenges that I did. Of people have wrong expectations, first of all. I really think that there are 2 kinds of disabilities: invisible or visible. And every eligibility for special education can fall under one of those 2 categories. An invisible one are your ones that you don't see. It's not evident when you look at the person. So your autism, your ADHD, your learning disabilities, your other health impaired eligibility. And then you have your ones that you can see, orthopedic impairment, a Down syndrome, or maybe an intellectual delay. Sometimes you can see the behavior. You see it faster than you recognize it, unfortunately. And we tend to have, excuse me, lower expectations for the for the visible disabilities, and higher expectations for the invisible disabilities, meaning that because we can't see it and it's not in our face all the time, we think kids should be able to do more than what they're able to do, whether that is that behavior or academics. Because oftentimes with a lot of the disabilities, sometimes all the cylinders are clicking and everything is working beautifully, and they can output fantastic information or fantastic skills that we don't see every day. But then other times it's just not working that way. And so I often heard, well, they did it yesterday, so they can do it today. They're just lazy today. They just don't want to today. And that is nothing near the truth at all. In my book, every student that I ever worked with would often say to me, I just wish I could be like everybody else. Why can't I learn like Jimmy or Joey? Why can't I behave like Sally or Susie? They said to themselves they can't, because they knew they didn't have as much control over it as other people thought they did. So that obstacle is definitely, I think, the biggest one, which is why I wrote the book. Well, it's not why I wrote the book, that God told me to write the book, but but what I'm hoping the outcome of the book is that it will change perspectives. Why I do my own podcast, to try to broaden people's experiences to those who are different than them as far as learning and behavior, and get that eye-opening experience like I had.
Yeah, amen. Amen. And from what I understand, you have to help not just the students, but sometimes you have to help the parents in order to
Oh,
provide
absolutely.
help to the students. I mean, explain the
Yes.
difficulties in working with the parents in what you do.
Oftentimes, whenever I would be in an IEP meeting, just individualized education program, that's the document that drives special education, parents wouldn't want their child to be found eligible for special education because that meant that all those suspicions that they might have had about their child not being on level with their peers, or not even on level as much as just being able to express being on level, or being different in some way. Now we've solidified that fear, and so they don't want to hear that their child actually qualifies for special education. So sometimes or oftentimes what I would tell parents is, I'm not just working with your child's academics, I'm working with your whole child. There's emotional, there's behavioral, there's um, spiritual. I didn't usually say that to most of my parents, but if I knew that parents were faith followers, religious people, that I would say that to them. Like, I actually prayed for my students regularly, and I still pray for them, even though I'm not in the classroom full time anymore. Um, and also having parents understand that just because your child learns differently, yeah, there's unfortunately still that stigma that comes with special education, but we're actually going to help your child understand that it isn't something wrong with them. It isn't something that they're doing. It's just who they are. It's how God made them, and to accept that and be joyful in who they are. Because once we open up our hearts to those who have a difference in their abilities as from ours, our lives are so much better when we can start to see things through the person who has the disability's eyes. And so, helping parents understand, oftentimes, here are some strategies to use for the behaviors, or here are some ways to help your child learn this material, or this is okay to accept this method of them getting that information out, even though it might be different than, another sibling or a friend, or, what a relative. And so helping them understand too, and accept that
Yeah.
different doesn't mean bad.
Amen. Amen. When I was back in school, I'm talking way back in the early 1970s, the special needs students did not even attend the same public schools as the general
Right.
population. Whether that's right or
Right.
wrong, that's the way it was back then. When did this transformation begin that actually integrated them into the same educational atmosphere?
Well, I might not be too far behind you in school, because I was also in elementary school in the 70s. The law itself came into effect in 1975.
Mm.
It has been reauthorized twice since then. The real inclusion piece of it was in the 1990, I think it was 1990 or 1991 reauthorization, where it really talked about, we need to now have these kids who are different than their peers in with their peers. Because honestly, when you think about it, everybody has differences. 80%, 80 to 85% of people kind of fall into one category of how they learn, but that still leaves 15 to 20% of people who don't fall under that category. And unfortunately, that category of that 80, 85% is the way that most teachers teach. So I didn't realize when I was in third grade that those kids were in a closet down the hall, a literal closet. And it was down a hall that nobody went into. And then as I got older and got into teaching, like I said, it was in the early 90s where the inclusion piece came in. And now in 2004 was the last time the law was reauthorized. And it's being even more inclusive and talks about that least restrictive environment of it's not always the gen ed classroom. Sometimes all day in a special education classroom is the least restrictive environment. It's what's determined individually appropriate for the child. And so what we're needing to do now is, okay, we are now putting all of these children with special education eligibility more into the general education population, but we need to train our general education teachers better, and we need to train our peers who aren't in special education, because we do a lot of training in special education of how the child who's eligible should behave and interact and be learning in their general education classroom. But we don't often teach our general education peers, hey, it's okay that this person learns differently than you. It's okay if they behave differently than you. And then we talk to them and we teach them as much as we're teaching the special education students.
Amen.
We teach the general education students equally to understand each other.
Yeah. Amen. Amen. How has this method of integration helped improve their ability to integrate into society as a whole, like after schools? They
So I
graduate.
think we're seeing, I think we're seeing a much better population of our students who learn differently in the workforce and in life, just being successful. And honestly, many times I think when people think about people with special needs, they're thinking about those visible disabilities more so than those invisible ones. Some of our greatest inventors, some of our biggest celebrity names are people with ADHD or learning disabilities. And within the category of learning disabilities is dyslexia and dysgraphia and dyscalculia. I can hardly ever say that word correctly. And so we tend not to realize that a huge population of people have those invisible disabilities because they have found ways to fit in to society and use their differences as strengths. Like I said, there are so many celebrities and like they think Albert Einstein had ADHD or possibly autism. Now I have like pictures of them in my head and I can't think of any of their names right now, but I do a post every so often in my social media about, excuse me, the fact that, these people, and they're all celebrities, all names that everybody knows, have a specific learning disability, have dyslexia, and they are incredibly successful. Steve Jobs, I believe they say has ADHD or a specific learning disability. Bill Gates. And so those who have these eligibilities for special education are being integrated all the time into society now, although the population of unemployment is still like 3 times higher than those who don't have any kind of eligibility for special education. I think it's like at 8% on average. And so we still need to work, but I think typically that's more of the visible disabilities that tend not to have the employment. But it's something that needs to be worked on, and we are getting better. There's transition programs to help kids. By the time they're in high school, they start doing transition programming into their IEP to help them find the resources, find the companies that are special education friendly,
Amen.
that,
Yeah.
um, there's an actual whole organization that I had on my podcast called Mentra, and it's kind of like LinkedIn for people who
Mm.
have disabilities.
Really? Okay.
And
Wow.
so, yeah, and so they're able to find jobs all over the country now, not just
Amen.
in necessarily their own hometown. They're able to get jobs elsewhere, and because they're being paired up with companies and individuals who, as I said, are special education friendly.
Yeah. Amen. Amen. That's awesome. I didn't even know that. That's good.
Yeah, they were my
Well,
100th
nice.
episode of my podcast. It was really
Praise the
exciting.
Lord. Amen. Yeah. Amen.
Yeah.
So why did you write this book, Those Who Can't Teach, and why did you feel it was needed now?
Well, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, God told me to write the book. And once I recognized God's still small voice, I try to listen and do whatever he tells me. Writing a book was not something that I had ever thought about doing, but he expressed to me that the stories of the people that I knew from teaching and my friends and my family who had someone in them with a disability, um, their stories were absolutely worth telling. And they were beautiful stories. And I felt, would bust that stigma of, oh, you can't, you're never going to, you won't, your family isn't. And that's also where the title comes from, Those Who Can't. We each pause on that word. It's in quotation marks. And the reason for that title is also God. I was laying in bed and I was praying about it one night, and I had a completely different title and I don't even remember what it was. Um, and I remember him asking me, why don't you like that saying, those who can do, those who can't teach? No teacher likes that saying. I've never met one who does. And I answered, I said, well, because it always makes me feel less than. As a teacher, my occupation is somehow less than all the other occupations because, well, if I couldn't do anything else, I went into teaching. And he said, that's how the families and the individuals in your book feel. And I went, oh, wow. And he says, but what did you learn from teaching and working with your students and your families? Just like teachers, if we open ourselves up, we can learn so much. It's not academics, it's character, it's unconditional love, it's tenacity, it's perseverance, um, it's finding joy in every part of life. So at the end of every chapter, I write the things that I learned from the individual and or their family. And that's what I'm hoping. I've done book studies with dozens of teachers now since the book has come out. And that's the first question I ask them. What did you think when you saw this title? Why would a teacher title a book with that phrase? And then I explain to them what my reason was for having the title that it is. And I've had every teacher that has done the book study with me and every teacher who has read the book and commented back to me that they would 100% recommend it to their colleagues because it does give a different perspective. When we go through our education, we learn about reading, we learn about writing, we learn about math, we learn about behaviors, we learn about the pedagogy, we learn about the great philosophers who came up with all of this stuff. We learn teaching strategies. Did you ever, in all of those things that I just mentioned, hear that we learn about the individual or their parent and what their life is like? No, but that's what this book does. There are 9 different stories. It's 10 chapters. The first is a more expansive version of what I shared about myself earlier. And then the other 9 chapters are those individual stories of those individual families or the person themselves. I have a few chapters where the person with the eligibility for special education was willing and able to share their story with me.
Amen. Amen. And so you worked with or know every family that's in the book,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Wow. Wow.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did
And
they initially how did they initially respond when you approached them about telling their story in the book?
some of them were hesitant. Others of them were honored that I would even think that their story would be worth telling, which was baffling to me. And others were, okay, absolutely, let's do it. Every one of them were very honest and very raw. And I thought, having been in special education for so long and having known some of these families forever, it seemed, um, there's one young lady in here that I taught her for 10 years, all the way from preschool through 8th grade. So I'm in a very small community, and so we just have one school for all of those grades. I thought I had a really good understanding of what their lives were like, because they were sharing things that were happening outside of school, all the medical appointments, all the family functions, all the social activities that they were involved in. And then I interviewed them for the book, and I found out that I really only had about a thimbleful of knowledge of what it really is like every day, every minute of every day. As one of the moms told me, when you get that, when your child gets a diagnosis, and her particular child did, born with it, it's an every minute, every second of every day for the rest of your life or that child's life diagnosis. It's not, oh, you have pneumonia and it's going to get better in a few months. It's every second of every minute of every day, 365 for a lifetime. And I never really thought about that. You know, I taught the students, or I interacted with the families, and then they left and I didn't deal with it anymore. But that individual and that family is dealing with it every minute, every second of every day.
Yeah. Amen. Amen. I know I read that many special needs teachers wish you would have written this book sooner.
Yes.
How is that? How has the publication of your book, Those Who Can't Teach, impacted the teachers?
It's doing a beautiful thing. It is giving them that enlightenment, and I have now started promoting it to colleges and universities to try to make it as supplemental reading for those who are honestly going into the medical profession, the teaching profession, the social work profession, because yes, it's great for teachers, but honestly, anybody, as we mentioned before, we have these inclusive companies now where, you know, your coworker could have dyslexia or ADHD or an intellectual disability. And reading this book will help you have a better understanding of what their life is like. And so that comment of, I wished I'd had this sooner, spurred me to start reaching out more to at the university level and getting it into these colleges. I haven't found one yet who's 100% taken it in and said, yes, this is going to be part of our curriculum, but I've got them thinking about it.
Amen. Amen. Has the book resulted in any type of improvements in the children's educational processes that you know of yet?
In the mindset of the teachers that have read the book, they have talked about how they're more empathetic towards the families. And because they have a better understanding now, they have changed their expectations to match more realistic expectations. The book hasn't been out long enough to really have any long-term changes that I'm aware of. It's only been out a couple of years. But I know that if a teacher's mindset changes, that's going to change what's happening into the classroom. And oftentimes it is that social emotional piece that changes the academic piece more than anything else.
Yeah, amen. Amen. During your tenure and during the writing of this book, how has this affected your faith in God and your faith in man?
Well, the writing of the book, it was a 3-year process from the moment he gave me the idea until the moment it went live on Amazon. Just that amount of time was not what I expected when I was writing the book. I thought, oh, okay, you know, I wrote my chapter in a day. And I thought, oh, well, this is going to be easy. You know, boy, was I wrong. Just the interviews. I mean, I interviewed some of the families 3-4 times, and each time would be, you know, an hour or more, and then having to basically transcribe, but put it into story form, what the interview was about. And they are 100% true stories. The only thing I did is that several of the families did not want to be known. And so, I've changed some details of, instead of a particular name of a hospital, I gave it a different name, or a name of a town, I gave it a different name. But I mean, other than those kind of details, everything about everything in the book is 100% true. Learning to lean on God in those moments when I didn't trust that this was going to do anything. I didn't trust that this was ever going to get done.
Yeah.
And really just putting it back at his feet and saying, okay, you told me to do this. How do I do this? Give me the motivation to sit down and write today, because there would be times where I would write every single day or edit or do, whatever. And then there would be times where I'm like, I can't, I don't have it. I don't feel it. And I could go a few weeks without doing something.
Mm-hmm.
But then he put, when it was time to have an official editor, he put that person in my path. I had no idea where to look. I was talking to someone about, that I was to that point, and she said, well, I know someone who just left the military, retired from the military, was they didn't call it an editor, but that basic position in the military, so had done it for 20 years. And she's going to start her own business now.
Oh, amen.
And she's a Christian, and she has a child with autism. Check, 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 check. I mean, okay, Lord, you placed that person in my lap. Then when it was time to do the publishing of the book, I am self-published, but I didn't really know the whole process to do all of that. Yes, I could have learned it. Yes, I could have muddled through it myself, probably. But again, I was talking to someone and they said, oh, well, here's some people that you could reach out to. And they gave me a whole list of people. The first person I reached out to seemed like I just connected with this person, and they were, in my local area. They were in St. Louis, Missouri. I'm on the Illinois side, in Southern Illinois. And I thought, this is it. Come to find out later, they are also Christians. And, he's just lined everything up. Yeah. And so my faith expanded, because when he gives you something, you got to trust him that he's going to provide everything that you need to accomplish what he's given you to do. Yeah. And I still do that today with, okay, Lord, this is your book. Yes, it's got my name as the author, but this is his book. Yeah. He gave it to me. He gave me the title. He gave me the idea. He gave me every family that is in the book. They were the first families that I asked. I didn't have to search over, hill and dale to find people to be in the book. And I even had about 7 more families lined up to do a Those Who Can't Teach too. But he hasn't led me to write that version, so I haven't done anything else with those families. But he's just really opened it up, getting it out there. Anytime I feel like, okay, I guess this is done, I'm like, nope, this is yours, Lord. What do you want to do with it? I surrender it. My word for 2023 has been surrender. And I have surrendered the book, and surrendered the outcomes, and surrendered the changes, and surrendered the income that may come out of it, all back to him, because it's his. Yeah. Amen. And when one of the things that I do with the proceeds of the book is it helps offset my costs to families who need my services but can't afford them. Many times, families with children who have special education needs also have medical needs, and those medical needs are extremely expensive. Yeah. I just read about a lady who she had to quit her job because her child needs 24 hours a day care, and it's summertime, and she had a person who was helping her, but the company that she was using is short-staffed, and so even though she hired them, they're not able to do what they promised her. And so she's had to take off work constantly because she's a single mom. So this is a person who, their child has an IEP, and they would absolutely love to have my services and help them get the appropriate IEP written for their child, but they can't afford my services because they have all these other expenses. And I understand that. And so a lot of the proceeds from the book do that so that I can provide a lot of free sources and free help to people.
Amen.
So buy the book.
That's right. Amen. Now, I know it's a sensitive area in education, but were you able to share your faith with students or parents along the way?
I was. The area where I grew up in is a pretty Catholic dominated area. And so I shared a lot about, like I mentioned, if I knew that that family was a family who went to church on a regular basis or who professed Christianity of some style, I would talk to them about the fact that I prayed. And many times the families talked about it themselves that are in the book. My heart was broken into a million pieces when my child was diagnosed, but God has taken every one of those pieces and put them back together in a more beautiful way than I could have ever expected. It's almost verbatim of one of the families in the book.
Amen.
And so, yeah, I would often talk to my families about, that I'm praying for your child, that, do you have a church that you go to? Come to my church. As much as I felt led to do, I was able to do. And I think that's because it's here in the Midwest, we tend to be a lot more church going counties and people than other parts of the world, I think. I apologize if I'm wrong. I'm not trying to offend or say that, other people aren't that way, but I mean, we're called the Bible Belt for a reason.
That's
so.
right. Amen. You also host your own podcast. It's on Facebook and YouTube called #No Limits. Share a little bit about your program with us.
Yeah, so it's sort of stemmed from the book. The idea, the tagline is, I interview people who society has placed limits upon, but who have busted through those limits. Ophelia says in Hamlet, we know who we are, but not who we will be. And I believe that 100% because I saw my students live that out yearly, daily. And so after writing the book was in the editing phase. So my part was pretty much done and the pandemic hit. And I thought, okay, well, now how do I get my name out there and keep my name out there? What am I going to do? And I thought, I want to tell more stories than what are in the book. And so in June or July of 2020, I interviewed the first person, and he was a university basketball player. I think it's a two, what do they call it? Division II school. And he was missing part of one of his arms. And I thought, now there's a story I want to tell. And he was keeping up. I mean, they weren't giving him any special treatment whatsoever. And he was doing everything. And it just so happened to be the same college that my daughter attended at the time. And so I asked him if I could interview him. I said, I would love to tell your story. And so we did that. And then I thought, oh, well, hey, I'm not terrible at this. The first ones definitely are not as good as the later ones. But it was a learning curve for sure. I did a lot of reading of my questions in those early phases, but now it's just a conversation like you and I are having today. But yeah, I've learned so much more than what I already knew. And my world has been, I realized my own biases about things. I interviewed a blind hockey team, a blind baseball team. I never thought either of those sports could be played by someone who was legally blind. And, it's amazing the things that are out there. And I love that my own biases get recognized, because oftentimes we don't know that we have them until they're challenged. And so having the podcast, being able to talk with these individuals, and I also talk with teachers who are doing great things and helping students bust through limits. I've talked with companies, organizations, individuals, because I realized these children, these people haven't busted through those limits all on their own. They had support people around them.
Amen.
And so I felt like that was important as well, to bring those companies and those people on and talk to them.
Amen. Shelley, this has been so interesting. How can someone order a copy of your book? You said it's on Amazon, correct?
It is on Amazon. I've recently redone the back cover, and I'm still trying to get Amazon to get the new back cover up there, but they can go to Amazon pretty much anywhere books are sold, Walmart.com, barnesandnoble.com, or they can go to my website, which is www.shelley, Shelley, Kenow, Kenow.com, and you can get an autographed version of it. It's a little bit more expensive when you order it with me because I have to ship it. And a lot of that's included, big companies, they don't have those expenses as much as I do. But
Amen.
um,
Yeah.
you have to order it. It's not, I've never seen it on a shelf in a bookstore.
Yeah.
But your Barnes and Noble, any of your kind of big bookstores, it's accessible to them. It just has to be ordered.
Amen. So if someone wanted to reach out to you again for more information or ask a question, maybe even do an interview like this, give us that contact information one more time. How can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, the easiest way is just to go to my website, www.shelleykenow, SHELLEYKENOW.com. And on my website, there'll be a free consult button, and there's also a link to click to get to my email.
Amen. Amen. I'll put links to all this in the show notes below. Folks, you may or may not have a special needs child. Whether you do or not really doesn't matter because I know you know someone who does. Amen. You need to drop down the
Mm.
show notes and reach out to Shelley right now. You need to be sure to order a copy of her book, Those Who Can't Teach, right now. In fact, I'd order 2 or 3 copies and share them with those that you know. Order a copy, take it to your school,
Mm.
give it and sew it in to the special needs teacher at your child's school. I mean, they'll be
Mm.
eternally grateful for you. Amen. Drop down the show notes, click the link right there. Shelley, thank you again for coming on the program today and sharing about all that you're doing about this great book. I do appreciate your time.
Absolutely. It was my pleasure.
Amen. Folks, that's all the time we have for today. For Shelley Kenow and myself, this Pastor Bob reminding you to be blessed in all that you do.